Hi, welcome to this product overview video of Naviate SpaceGen. SpaceGen is an Excel-driven planning and compliance tool designed to connect your project brief directly to your Revit model. By importing space schedules from Excel, you can quickly generate and test massing options while maintaining full control of your data. As designs evolve, SpaceGen keeps your model aligned with the original brief, tracking area compliance visually and enabling you to generate rooms, walls and floors automatically. The real value of SpaceGen is keeping everything connected. As requirements change, you can instantly see what's been synchronized, what's out of sync, and where issues exist. Naviate SpaceGen can be currently found on the Add-ins tab and is currently available for Revit 2026 and Revit 2027. The license tool manages activation and access to SpaceGen, ensuring your application is ready for use across your project. Mass from Excel is where it all begins. This tool allows you to bring your space schedule directly into Revit, automatically generating room masses based on your Excel data and establishing a clear link between the brief and your model. The circulation cutter then enables you to refine your layout by defining circulation spaces such as corridors and stairwells. By subtracting circulation from rim masses, you can accurately calculate usable areas and understand how movement affects your spatial efficiency. Once the layout is complete, the model builder translates those masses into real Revit elements. Walls, floors and rooms are generated automatically, maintaining alignment with the original space data, whilst transitioning from concept to detailed design. Let's now take a look at the product in further detail. Let's begin by taking a look at the Excel space schedule. So here we can see that we have column headers at the top. This is compulsory and this is how we can map the column data to parameters inside the family. Also, the room ID is compulsory and mandatory. Each row must have a unique reference. Behind this information there's an SQL-like database and the room ID is used as a unique key, so each of these values has to be unique. Outside of that we can have as much information as we want. Now the room gross area isn't mandatory, but it is used for compliancy checks versus the gross and net area, so it is a good idea to have room gross area also in your Excel space schedule. So with that done, let's now connect this to our mass from Excel. So on the Add-ins tab we can select Mass from Excel and that opens up the SpaceGen Mass from Excel dialog. We can then begin by loading the Excel file. So again here we'll select our FE College space plan and select Open. What we can now do is select the family that is going to be used to represent our mass space. Now this can either be a Revit mass or it can be a generic model. So in this example here, I'm actually using FE Mass, which happens to be a generic model. What we can now see in the data grid here is the auto mapping, and if the Excel column and the shared parameter in the family actually match names, then it will auto map, as you can see here. However, some of this data hasn't mapped across, so I can manually map this to other shared parameters in the family. So in this case here, the occupancy will be equal to room occupancy. And as soon as I map that, you can see the data is populated then in the data grid. We'll then do the same for space category. So this is going to be our room department in here. And finally, the room description in here would again be room description, but you can see this particular one doesn't have a space in between it. So we can now see all of that information has correctly mapped and is now populated in the data grid below. This data grid here can be organised by clicking on the column headers, so we can actually sort by perhaps the department or perhaps the actual room widths. Another way of actually finding data is to be able to filter the data grid in here. So I'd like to begin by placing out all of the administration space. So again here I can actually filter that data grid. I can then make a selection of all of the information here and then I can decide how I'm going to place out these spaces. In this example here, I'm going to use my horizontal alignment, and this will simply place out those 4 spaces horizontally from the internal origin. So in the dialog, I'll go ahead and select Place Selected. And we can now see those 4 spaces are placed out. Let's let's now tag these. So we'll go to the Annotate tab. I'll select Tag All. And in my example, this is a generic model. And you can see I've prepared a tag for this. And we can then place out those tags. Now once this is done, we can then move these spaces into an area where we want to start creating our building arrangement. So looking into this now, what I might want to do is actually have the principal's office within this open plan administration office. So I'm going to actually drag that and we'll snap that into position here. Now of course by doing this it means I actually have to cut the principal's office out of the administration office. To do that I can select the Modify tab, I can select Cut, and I'll select the Open Planned Admin Office, that's what I'm cutting from, and I want to then cut the principal's office. Now simply by doing that, we'll now notice that the compliancy of the Open Administration Office isn't 100%. Let's now go ahead and open up the Mass from Excel dialog again. So I'll go to the Add-ins tab and select Mass from Excel again. This time I'm going to select the Edit and Sync tab, and we can very clearly see now that we have some spaces in here that are already placed out in the model. You can now see the area compliance is 100% on 3 of the spaces, but of course here the Open Plan Admin Office is now only 83% of compliancy. The yellow highlights here are simply telling me that this data wasn't auto-mapped and of course is now different from the Excel. What I can also do here is create view filters into the space. So if I select Create View Filter, we can now see that the view filter has been generated within the model, and this makes it even easier to actually see rooms that aren't compliant. So I can see here that this room needs to increase in size to get the compliancy back to 100%. So of course I can just use the shape handles here to drag this until I get a compliancy of 100%. What we can then do is continue to arrange the rooms as we see fit. And again here, just to make this easy, I'm going to have the exam office line up with the meeting room. And of course now we're over compliance again. So we can just drag this back again to try and get 100% of that compliancy. Okay, so those rooms are now placed out. Let's go ahead and place some more spaces from Mass from Excel. To do this effectively, we'd want to go to the Edit and Sync tab. And of course here we can now see that these 4 spaces are already placed out. So we can just remove those by filtering that out of the data grid, and we can then continue to place in some other spaces. So what I'd like to do here is place in some additional spaces which are going to be general classrooms. So of course I can again filter the data grid. Okay, and that'll be enough here just to filter this information out, and I can see we now have all of these classrooms. So I'm going to place all of these in one go. It's worth also mentioning that if we have a multi-storey building, then I can obviously change the level, and these spaces will then be placed out on the active level. So let's go ahead and place these, and in this example what I'd like to do is place these in a grid arrangement. Okay, so we can now see those spaces are placed out. Once again I can actually position these so they're not actually clashing with my current building arrangement, so perhaps we'll add that down here. And what I'd like to do is again tag these, so we'll go to Annotate, Tag All, and we'll go ahead and tag all of those spaces again, like so. So we can now start to arrange these. I'm going to have a corridor running down through here. So of course we can just drag these into position. You'll see because we have reference planes set up nicely on the families, everything will snap into position, which is quite nice. So I'm going to have this space now up over here. Okay, so we'll place these. I'm going to have another corridor running down over here. Okay, obviously here we can see that we've got slightly smaller classrooms over here. So in this example, to keep some sort of an alignment at the bottom here, this might be like an external wall. Obviously I could change the size of this classroom over here and then increase the length this way to actually maintain the compliancy. So we'll do something like that. And then I can pick up those spaces over here and I can just shift those so that they align like so. And then we'll get the final 2 spaces and we'll place those in here. Okay, so there's the arrangement I want for the first session here. What I now need to do is generate some corridor space around here. Now of course this won't be in the space schedule because at this point we don't know how much space we want until we've arranged the building. So what I'm going to do here is simply copy one of these existing spaces. Copying the space over here, what's imperative is that we change the room ID. So we've already said that this has to be completely unique. So what I'm going to do here is give this a prefix of Z, and this will be Z01. Of course, the room description will be a corridor in this example, and I'm just going to say corridor A in this example, and that will be the same as the room name. Now, another critical part here is to make sure that the isCirculation parameter is checked, and this is how SpaceGen will then be able to identify this as circulation space. So we can now stretch this through the project. Okay, we can bring that down to where we want the circulation space to exist, and of course now we have an overlap between our circulation space and all of the other placed out rooms. If we go to the SpaceGen tab, you can see here we have Circulation Cutter. Selecting this, I can make a selection set, and in here I can refresh that selection, and we can see now that SpaceGen has identified the corridor against all of the other rooms. I can simply click Apply here, and all those spaces will be cut. Of course, there will be elements that don't intersect, so we can just click OK to that. And now, if I click Finish, we can see that we have our corridor space. Looking into the instance properties here, we can see that we have a net area of 180.45. What I'm going to do is copy that into gross, okay, and the target area in there will make the same. And of course, that is now compliant as well. Let's quickly look at a 3D view. So of course, if I open up a 3D view here, we can now see all of those spaces added in. So what we're now going to do is start to fill in some detail here and create some walls, internal walls, floors, and actual rooms themselves. To do that, we'll use the Model Builder. In the Model Builder dialog, we'll begin by selecting the masses. And we'll then select Finish on the tab. We've now got 17 masses selected and one circulation space selected. Selecting the parameter mapping here, this is where we can actually map our data from our generic models, in my case, to the actual room parameters themselves. And again here, where appropriate, you'll see that if the mass parameter matches the room parameter, then it's auto-mapped. Of course, we can manually map these as required as well. So what I'm going to do here is map this to occupancy, and our room description here can simply be mapped to comments in this example. So with that then done, if I go back to element types here, I can decide what elements I'm going to generate. So at the moment, we're generating external walls, internal walls, and floors. I've also got the option here to merge all of those floor plates together into one single floor, which is what I'm going to do here. And of course, I want to generate rooms as well. Looking at the element types to generate, we can then select our external wall type, the wall type we want to use for our internal walls, and then the floor type that we would also like to use. With that then done, we can select Build Elements. And we can now see that we have a report of all those elements that have been built. If I close this here, we can now see we've got the external walls going all the way around and the internal walls over here. Of course, I can temporarily switch off my generic models in here, and we're left now with our model. Let's now open up another plan. So you can see I've got level 0 rooms, and this particular view already has the masses switched off, in this case the generic models. And then what I'm going to do here is go to annotate, and I'll actually tag all of the rooms. So we'll use our room tags over here. And of course now we can see the rooms have been generated and all of the data has now been mapped across. Finally here we'll have a look at the history of the whole project. So we'll go back to the Add-ins tab, and here I'm going to open up Mass from Excel again. Now you'll notice here across the tabs at the top, I also have one titled Report. And you can see here we have logs. The latest one will be the first row. So if I select this one over here, there's the first 4 rooms that I synchronized and placed out. And you can see here I have my username and the timestamp and date when this actually happened. If I go to the next one along here, I can see that I placed out some additional rooms over here. And if I select the first one over here, again, I can see all of those new actions over here. So if I select A4, for example, over here, I can see the instance parameters and I can see the changes that have happened. So I'll notice here that the room length has now changed to 5 meters over here, and I can see the room width has also changed as well. I can also see an accurate room compliancy, and I'm within 0.8% of being 100%, so that's absolutely fine. What we can also do if we want to is we can export all of this as a comma-separated file. So I'll temporarily place this on my desktop and select Save, and I'll open that report. So here I can see now that full report. So here I've got all of the event timestamping over here. I've got the change that's actually happened over here, the old values and the new values. Of course here you can make reports directly in Excel if you want to, or you can actually use Power BI to report directly from this or a database. So here in the Power BI dashboard, I can now see I've got an overview of everything that's actually happened here. So I can see now where things have been synchronized, where things are out of sync, synced or new. Orphaned will mean where I've actually deleted items, and I can see here the workbook that's been used. Of course then you can use Power BI to visualize spaces and space versus circulation and so forth. Okay, so you've now seen an overview of Naviate SpaceGen. I hope you found that useful.